Hi, and welcome to my channel, Laura's Library Card. So today we are doing a hopefully rapid fire one-shot July wrap-up of everything that I read in that month. Off to a great start. In the month of July, I participated in the Tarot Readathon, which was a competitive teams-based readathon. I joined Team Wands, and our ability was that we had the ability to substitute a romance for a drawn tarot card prompt. This readathon worked by pulling a tarot card, and there were prompts for every tarot card in the deck, and that was supposed to help guide your reading, and you earned points. So I will do a summary at the end of how I did in the Tarot Readathon, and then at the end I'm going to actually look at the Discord, because I haven't checked yet, to see how Team Wands ultimately did. So feel free to check out timestamps down in the description for all the books that I'm going to talk about today, and also to go ahead and jump ahead to see how Team Wands fares for the readathon, because it'll be a surprise to you and me as of right now. So to start off the month, the first card that I drew was the Page of Pentacles, and this was to read the shortest book on your TBR. Off to a great start. So the first book that I finished in July was Princess Ever After by Kay O'Neill. And ultimately, this book is a book. The premise of this book is that Princess Amira rescues Princess Sadie from her tower, and the two of them become friends and go on an adventure and become heroes, and there's a little cute sapphic romance. I found this is a middle grade graphic novel, novella length, short 50-page book. It's cute, it has adorable, fun art, but I found the storyline to be kind of underdeveloped, or the whole thing was lacking much depth for me personally. So I found it to be overall generic and ultimately kind of forgettable. The second tarot card that I pulled was the Six of Cups, and the prompt was to read a book that brings you back to a nostalgic time of your life. And this worked out perfectly because I reread The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang for this prompt. This book follows Stella, who has autism, and she hires an escort, Michael, to teach her about sex and relationships, and it's a romance and they fall in love. So this is a reread for me, and this is a very, in my opinion, well-paced, idealistic story. Like Michael, dreamy, swoomy, but doesn't really exist. Unlike probably any guy who really exists. But it has really good tension throughout. The two characters do some fake dating, fake relationship, which is one of my favorite tropes and something you'll see multiple times throughout this month. And I do feel like the third act conflict is kind of dumb, a little weak, but I have read it 3 times and have enjoyed it every single time I've read it very thoroughly. The next tarot card that I pulled was The Fool, which was to read a new to you author. So I read Radiance by Grace Draven. And this book follows a arranged marriage between human woman Ildiko and Kai Prince Brishen. He's a non-human, it's a different race. And the book follows the two of them sort of getting to know each other and getting to know each other's cultures and dealing with the repercussions of this political marriage that they are in and all the plots that are against them. I felt that this had good emotional development. I really enjoyed how the characters got to know each other and the respect that blooms there. This is definitely a strangers to friends to lovers progression, and it is ultimately a slow burn, and there's a little bit of magic, and there is a fun plot line. I enjoyed it. It does kind of, trigger warning, get a little violent and gory towards the end of the book. Trigger warnings for violence and torture and death of secondary characters and that kind of thing. The next tarot card that I drew was the Knight of Swords, and the prompt was to read a book featuring a character on a mission or a quest. And I kind of felt like most books have quests in them, but I couldn't think of anything that I really wanted to read. So ultimately I used my Wand's ability to substitute a romance for this prompt, and so I read Flawless by Elsie Silver. I think this was my first Elsie Silver book. And in this book we follow rodeo rider Rhett, literally had to look up his name again. He ultimately has messed up his career and has to have his PR agent's daughter, Summer, kind of babysit him a little bit as they try to recuperate and recover for his career. And it's a romance and they fall in love along the way. Honestly, this was pretty forgettable for me. I thought it was cool that Summer was a lawyer. There were family dynamics involved. I think he came from a really loving family, but she had sort of childhood trauma, or multiple family members were like kind of cold to her. And I think this was the book where she had an inappropriate relationship with her previous doctor, which led to stupid third act conflict. It was fine. It was good. But it was, I don't know if Westerns are really for me. Have another Western later in the month. So I was glad that I substituted a romance instead of trying to figure out that prompt. But this is foreshadowing. The next card that I pulled was the Three of Swords. And this prompt is to read a book that you think will make you cry. And so for this, I chose Gravity by Tal Bauer because I've read Tal Bauer before and he always gets me misty and or crying. So in Gravity, we follow Bryce and Hunter. Bryce is from Quebec and Hunter is from the USA, but they are both professional hockey players in the NHL. And ultimately, this book is about them falling in love and playing hockey. So this is a male-male sports romance. There is kind of an insta-love element going on here, but it almost feels more like soulmates going on. There's a lot of pining. There's sort of a gay / bisexuality awakening. And even though there was this insta-love element, I really wanted another like 200 pages of this couple. Tal Bauer's writing is just top tier. He does such an amazing job writing joy and longing and love. So I found this book to be super swoony and romantic, and I would totally recommend it. There are trigger warnings for hospitalization and injury and that kind of thing. The next book that I didn't quite get to cry, but I did get misty. The next card that I pulled was the Five of Wands, which is to read a book featuring a competition or conflict among characters. And I sort of felt like every book has conflict among characters, so this'll work. And so I read Found by Imogen Keeper. Now, this is the third book in a series, and this is a series set in a post-apocalyptic United States where like a huge virus has killed off a ton of people, and we are following Frankie and York and Auden. Frankie's the woman, York is the man, Auden is the child, and they are trying to survive. Specifically in this third book of the series, this is the aftermath of this really big trauma that happens at the end of the second book of the series, and this little family is trying to kind of recover, navigate the healing process and some PTSD, and they're meeting new people, and can they trust these new people, and what are they going to do to continue to survive? So I'm really enjoying this series. These seem to be novella length or long novellas, short novels, and the writing is really casual and easy to read. I feel like the characters are super realistic and sympathetic, so I'm really enjoying being with them as they are doing this. I love a good survival story, something I've learned about myself. So this has been really hitting the spot. And I feel like there is enough plot in each novella to keep me turning pages. So trigger warnings for some violence and PTSD, and the violence in this book is sort of recovering from violence that happened in the second book, and like assault that happened in the second book. And so that was Five of Wands. The next card I drew was Eight of Pentacles, which is to, the prompt for that is to read a book where the character learns a new skill or has art in it. And this one was maybe a little bit of a stretch, but I ultimately read Hello Forever by Sarina Bowen, which is the follow-up sequel to a book that I read in June. So in Hello Forever, we follow... It's follow-up just because it's the same like universe, and you see some of the characters from the first book be secondary characters in this book. But in this book, Axel moves across multiple states, partly for a job and partly because he thinks Caxton is at this new location where his new job is. And the two of them are both guys, and they made out in church camp, and it caused huge it was like first love kind of situation. So this is definitely a second chance childhood friends to lovers book. Male, new adult. They're both early 20s age. And the two of them reconnect and then start a little secret relationship in this book. I honestly kind of wanted more throughout. I wanted a little bit more from the characters' backstories and understanding some of that childhood stuff. I wanted more from their personalities. I wanted more plot. I wanted a little bit more sort of like reasoning for the actions that did happen. I wanted more emotional development. I really felt like they jumped right to the physical attraction and then said, "Oh, I've loved you like this whole time." And I'm like, we need more here. Definitely major trigger warnings for homophobia and violence and like a hate crime, but I thought it was, pretty good. Other than, that bad stuff. The next card that I pulled is actually a repeat. So I pulled the Knight of Swords for a second time. And again, that prompt is to read a book featuring a character on a mission or a quest. And I felt like, okay, universe, I get it. You're trying to point at something here. And it actually worked out great because my book club was reading Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. And this is my first Brandon Sanderson book. So this is a fantasy young adult book following Tress, who sets sail to leave her home island, set sail out on a sea of spores, and she's on a big quest to try to find her lost love, Charlie. She becomes a pirate and is very clever throughout the course of the book. This is definitely a young adult story, sort of a story of personal growth. It's all about the journey that she takes, this big adventure, this big quest that she's on. There was a mix of sort of magic and science. It's more magic, it's more fantasy, but there was sort of some elements in there that I consider to be science fiction that I enjoyed. And overall, I did enjoy my time reading, but I was also kind of critical of multiple elements. So check out my full vlog book review, which I'll leave up in the cards and down in the description. So I talk a lot, but I had a lot of thoughts and feelings about Tress. The next card that I pulled for the Tarot Readathon was the Ace of Pentacles, which is to buy or borrow a book from your wish list. And I ended up reading The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. In this book, we follow Anna and West. West is his nickname. Liam is his real name. These two had a sort of marriage of convenience in college, and it's now a few years later and they're still legally technically married, and he needs her to play this loving, adoring wife at a family wedding to ultimately get his inheritance. And he has arranged to pay her for this performance, which she needs the money to help pay for her father's cancer treatments, that kind of thing. So it has the tropes of fake relationship, getaway tropical location, opposites attract, sort of rich poor dynamics. And I've read Christina Lauren and really enjoyed their work before, so I was all excited. And I struggled kind of throughout the whole book. I feel like West had a pretty awful family situation. A couple characters in particular were really, really terrible. And a lot of this book is super focused on money and on those differences between the rich and the poor and how the other half lives and what the inheritance was and what the loophole was and the company, blah, blah, blah. I really felt like the romance was just kind of underdeveloped or didn't have enough page time to shine. And I just wanted a lot more emotional development throughout, and it was kind of a disappointment for me. The next the next card that I pulled was the Sun, and the prompt for the Sun was to read a light, fluffy contemporary book. And so I went with The Fake Mate by Lana Ferguson. And I thought it was interesting. I wanted to give you the heads up before I start describing this. This is a Omegaverse book where our characters are wolf shifters. So we're following Mackenzie and Noah, who are both doctors and work at the same hospital, and they agree to be fake mates, which is a fake marriage essentially, for mutually beneficial work and private reasons. and because this is Omegaverse and they are both shifters, they both have designations. So he is an alpha and she is an omega. And partway through this charade of fake relationship, they decide, because there's a lot of chemistry happening here, to add benefits, throw some sex into their arrangement. And ultimately they catch real feelings and happily ever after, etc. This is somewhat grumpy sunshine. I don't feel like she is so sunshiny to balance his grumpy, but like there are some of those dynamics here. And of course, like most fake relationships, there's relatively flimsy reasons for why they have to enter into this relationship. And so therefore the third act conflict felt pretty flimsy to me as well. Overall, this is a very like generic plot line, something I've read many times before, but I thought the characterizations were decent, and there's definitely a lot of steam because it was, you know, Omegaverse and some of the things that happen between alpha and omegas. I do think this is like kind of a bridge between paranormal and Omegaverse. She said having only ever read one or two Omegaverses in her life, but this had an overall like fun, light tone, and I had a good time, and it fit the prompt. The next card that I drew was the Ace of Swords, which is to read a debut novel. So I ended up reading The Prospects by K.T. Hoffman. This is a male-male sports romance book where we follow teammates Jean and Luis. This is baseball. They reconnect and they fall in love during the season of baseball. It's minor leagues. And yeah, it's not quite second chance because they knew each other in college and had crushes in college, but they weren't together in college. Jean is out and openly gay and trans, and he sort of assumes that will mean that he will never make it to the major leagues. But Luis is good enough that everyone assumes that Luis will make it to the major leagues. And overall, there is good representation here with anxiety disorder or anxiety diagnosis, as well as LGBT representation. And I appreciated Jean's passion for baseball, but also there is a lot of fucking baseball in this book. And so I don't know, for me, I felt like the plot kind of needed tightening up. I wanted more page time of them interacting and falling in love. I felt like there was this whole dynamic of this weird friendship fight that went on between Jean and someone else, and it was like, what was the point of that? I honestly don't even like remember the third act conflict. I think it was just one of the characters being all stupid and in his head. I thought this was perfectly fine, but it kind of turned into a little bit of a slog for me. The last three cards that I pulled 4 more cards, but I only ended up fulfilling 3 more prompts. So I will discuss the last 3 books that I read in July. The next card that I pulled was the High Priestess, which was to read a book with a mystery element. And so I went with a romantic suspense of Inside Affair by Ella Frank. This book follows a celebrity anchorman, Xander, who is on the news and is, you know, hot and popular and gay. And he has a threatening stalker. So Xander goes to his best friend's brother, who is a detective, Detective Sean, agrees to be Xander's bodyguard, and they will pretend to be in like fake boyfriends, fake relationship as a cover for that. This is a fast-paced, quick read. I did it in one sitting, in one night. These two have known each other throughout childhood, but they weren't really friends before, and they kind of have a somewhat antagonistic fake relationship. There's a lot of teasing that is kind of mean, but then turns teasing and then turns sweet. And there is real feelings that start, and Sean is very surprised because he had thought he was straight, and so there's sort of a gay awakening here. But it ends very dramatically, so trigger warnings for violence at the end. And the next card that I drew was Queen of Pentacles, but it doesn't even matter because I was so determined on that cliffhanger ending to dive right into the next book that follows up the sequel to Inside Affair. So I read Breaking News by Ella Frank. And so in this second book, we are following one of the characters as they recover from the dramatic event that happened at the end of the first book. One of the characters, I'm trying to not do spoilers here, one of the characters is really struggling with PTSD after that event, and the two of them are still trying to figure out what does it mean that they're having these feelings for each other, and ultimately they decide to kind of dive right into the fact that they're having feelings for each other. And this, very typically for most brother's best friend kind of tropes, has a pretty stupid third act conflict, but overall I found that this one was just as much of a quick read, and it has a little bit more of heavy themes because of the actions that happened at the end of book one, but it was a little bit more emotional, and it was definitely more steamy. So it was a good continuation of these two guys' story. And so we are now at the last tarot card and book that I finished in July. I managed to just squeak it in and finish at the very technically 5 minutes after midnight at the very end of July. So the last card that I pulled was the Eight of Cups, and the prompt was to read a book that explores moving on or starting a new adventure, and I read Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. This book follows Emmy, who is a professional horse rider, barrel racer, kind of rodeo circuit thing. She has had a recent terrible fall off her horse, and so she comes back to her hometown and she runs into her brother's best friend, Luke, who has gotten a lot more responsible and way more hot since their youth. So she's kind of in a situation where she doesn't really know what she's doing with her life, and has a lot of uncertainty, but he helps her get back on the horse, literally, because she needs help. She can't ride right now. And so she's kind of dealing with some PTSD, anxiety stuff. There is also ADHD representation. The two characters have known each other since childhood. I felt like the reasons why she doesn't like him at the start of the book, like she's very antagonistic toward him, I felt like those reasons were not clear. And I also felt that he was essentially instantly in love with her. Certainly extremely lustful, but they both are very instantly why can't I get the other person out of my head in a mildly obnoxious way. And I wanted a few more on page interactions. There's a number of times when we're just told that they hung out, but we don't get to see those scenes. And I didn't super love the third act conflict either. I thought that was dumb. It is what they always are, essentially. And I always feel like, why the heck should your brother give a shit? But anyway, yeah, I thought it was fun and good. It was basically never going to be a 5-star read. So yeah, ultimately, overall, I did very well for the Tarot Readathon. I finished 14 titles, and I was able to submit, I was able to submit all of them for the Minor Arcana, which was a point per page. So I ended up reading 4,180 pages, which is 4,180 points for the Minor Arcana. And then each week your team has a card that is drawn, and you can earn Major Arcana points if the book that you read that week also fits for the significator card. And so ultimately 9 of the 14 books that I read were able to be counted for the Major Arcana points, so I had 9 points there. And then also I participated in the pulling daily tarot cards, not every day because I took a vacation, that kind of thing, but I was able to accumulate points for the hero's journey, so I had 43 points there. Overall for the month I had a 3.5 star rating. I don't really declare a lot of star ratings here on my channel, but overall it was a pretty good average for the month, and I feel like that's pretty accurate. A 3.5 was pretty much right where I would put a lot of these books. A couple ones really stood out, but didn't have too many big losers. Now is the time to open up my Discord and find out how the teams did, and I will declare to you how Team Wands fell in the ranking. And I kind of knew it wasn't gonna be very good. So ultimately for the Major Arcana trophy, Wands came in 4th place with 4 out of 4. So not great. And then for the Minor Arcana trophy, which is the total number of pages read, we were in 3rd place. And there's quite a big range here. There's actually like a fair amount of range for a number of points. It doesn't seem like, it's like people weren't really winning from like by one or 2 points. And also for the hero's journey, we were also in 3rd points. So very like middle of the road. I am a little, I wish could have done better. I feel like I had a pretty good month, but yeah, I think good job for Team Pentacles. They came in 1st place for both Major Arcana and Hero's Journey, and in 2nd place for the Minor Arcana. So yeah, I feel like I had a really good time. I will totally do this readathon again in the future. I think it's really fun to pull tarot cards and have a little bit of ability to reflect on the tarot card as well as the meaning behind it. I think that tarot cards are super interesting, and I had a really great time allowing the universe to help guide my reading this month. So that's going to be it for me for July. I hope you appreciated this wrap up, and feel free to check out my vlogs throughout the month of July where I read all of these books that I'm talking to you about. And I also went on a Canadian vacation in July, so I think the first vlog of that is up. And so yeah, feel free to check any of those things out. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these books, if you have any recommendations for maybe another. I would give Western another try, but like I'm not a horse girly, so they haven't super landed really well. And I don't know. I would give it a try. If you have a Western recommendation, leave it down in the comments for me. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you next time. Bye.